we've not been prepared to face up to just how much of an economic mess we're genuinely in. As we slip down the global league tables, we kid ourselves. Well, it's okay. We've got GDP growth. But there wouldn't have been any GDP growth over the course of the last few years if it wasn't for mass migration on a scale hitherto never even contemplated, and of course, excess government borrowing. That is all that has kept GDP figures up. And indeed, I think we can argue very strongly that on an individual basis, mass migration has made the average Briton poorer. You take a year like 2024, a record level of people coming into the country, and GDP per capita falling. And of course, the productivity problem, well, there's nothing new there. We've been suffering from poor productivity going back for the best part of 20 years. We convinced ourselves that by importing masses of cheap, unskilled foreign labour, that somehow that would be good for our economy. Well, it was good for the wage bills of big companies in the short term, but catastrophic when it came to training and education for our own workforce. And when it comes to the public sector, who still seem to be hooked on the idea that working from home somehow is good for productivity, well, we see the disastrous results, and this is something that Danny Kruger, on our behalf, has started work on already. But the one subject we really don't discuss, at least the Conservative and Labour parties don't discuss, is the level of national debt. In fact, even last week, the leader of the Conservative Party was saying, in office, we cut the deficit for 14 years. Well, cutting the deficit is a very different thing to cutting debt when you're still running borrowing certainly at peacetime levels, unlike anything ever seen before. They may try to wash their hands and run away from it, but our national debt increased by over 2.5 times during those 14 years. And now it's accelerating. Now it's accelerating in the most extraordinary way. The OBR predictions for the year going back just before the general election was that we'd borrow 77 billion in the year. That estimate is now 130 billion and rising with each and every month. Our debt has risen faster than any other comparable Western country. In fact, in the last 20 years, our debt-GDP ratio is up by nearly 60%. We are doing worse on debt than any of our competitors, and that includes Eurozone countries who are in other deep, deep trouble. Our debt repayments are over 100 billion a year, beneficiary in almost every single sector. Solar and as much wind as you want. But frankly, the grid that we have, without spending 2 to 3 trillion pounds updating it, cannot cope with that intermittent energy, which is why we now pay wind turbines to turn off when there is too much wind. The lunatic cost of net zero is continuing deindustrialization. 3 or 4 more years of this, there'll be very little manufacturing left in Britain at all, believe me. And when you think about it, it's really quite mad, isn't it? Because we're not just seeing the closure of our refineries and everybody else, who, for many cases, energy contributes 40% of their overall bill.